I've been an aviation buff since the age of about 2 or 3. I remember as a very, very young man drawing little tiny airplanes in the corners of my papers, and I've always had this thing about airplanes. And I started flying at the age of 12. I was learning how to clean honey buckets. Does everybody know what a honey bucket is? Well, that's how I started in the business, cleaning honey buckets and cleaning the runway lights. So I've been in this business a long time, and I've been aviation and aviation safety is something that I do. I'm very passionate about it. I'm the senior member. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm the oldest. Actually, it does mean that. But I'm the oldest guy for the accident investigation team. There's only 7 of us that travel worldwide for the FAA. The NTSB also has a GO team, but the FAA has 10 responsibilities, and we try to find, because of the manufacturer, the pilots, the medical part, the training, we have a lot of issues that we have to look into where the NTSB determines the probable cause, and we work very closely hand in hand. And what I did when I got a call from Ms. O'Farrell to do the top 10 causes of general aviation accidents, I decided, well, that should be a walk in the park. Well, little did I know that everybody has their own opinion about what are the top 10 causes. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to use my way, and I went down to, we have a analytical department in the FAA, sits right next to me, and I asked them, I said, okay, what are your top 10s? And they started giving me all these things. They'd use these big words, and of course I didn't know what they even meant. So I had to put them all back to Southernese, something that I could understand. And so what I did, I came up with the top 10. And the way I looked at it was this. If you look at the very first picture over on the right-hand side over there, that's an airplane that I worked down in Texas. It was an air ambulance flight. Getting into the overview of getting results through non-regulatory productive strategy and education. That means the FAST team, the FAA, gets out there and works with the flying public to try to help these folks out, help to understand why accidents occur. As the former speaker was talking about the loss of control, I'm on a loss of control working group, and I really understand why this works, and I've been flying all my life. I've got as much upside down time as I do right side up time, but I also fly helicopters too. So there's flying airplanes, helicopters, there's a lot of things to do in there. And one of the FAA's top priorities is to reduce the number of fatal accidents in general aviation. The last major air carrier accident we had was, unfortunately, the Buffalo accident, the Kogan Dash 8 Q400 that crashed. That was actually the last one. But right now, we have so many general aviation pilots out there, and we're starting to find out that there are more and more. Unfortunately, what I do is I do mainly the big airplane accidents, the high-profile 121s, the 135s, and the high profiles with very, I guess, people in them. I did the Kennedy accident, for instance. You know, a general aviation pilot, but I was the investigator in charge for the FAA on the John F. Kennedy accident. And I've done probably 600 or 700 accidents, so I've had my share of them. And to develop an accurate picture of the contributing factors and what causes this. The way I started off with number 10. What is the number 10 cause of an accident? Well, to me, after reading all the stuff that I found from the NTSB, my analytical guys, and just sitting down and reading it, I said, okay, wind shear or thunderstorms is your number 10 cause of an accident. It goes into pre-flight planning, weather knowledge, and get-home-itis. Now, everybody in the whole world knows those are T6s flying overhead, right? So the get-home-itis, everybody's done it. I've done it, bad as I hate to say it, yes, I've done it. And some of the contributing factors are as a distraction, monitoring airspeed, situational awareness, and multitasking. Well, let's just take a look at it. If you'll take a look at that picture, the airplane starts at the lower left-hand corner. He's on his way to Manassas, Virginia. It's a Cessna 210. As you can see, they're flying up into the right-hand side up there. That happens to be a level 6 thunderstorm. This pilot was flying a Cessna 210, like I said, and now you're going to see who it belongs to. You ever heard the name Scott Crossfield? Well, that's his airplane. And what I tried to do is I tried to pick accidents that our office actually worked. So I would have firsthand knowledge of this one. Miss Vicki Anderson from our office was the investigator in charge for the FAA on this particular accident. So that way I could get good current pictures, all the things that we need, and I could get the insides of it. This particular accident occurred. He got a weather briefing, but en route, ATC never advised him of any airments or signals or any significant weather. And when he asked for a turn, he took the turn. They gave the turn to him, the ATC did, and unfortunately, the results are Mr. Crossfield died. Now, we were talking about the experience level. how much more experience would you want than Mr. Scott Crossfield? And we were talking about upset recoveries and attitudes. Sometimes the level 6 thunderstorm will clean your clock. I don't care how good you are. And unfortunately, that's the results of it. We lost a great man due to weather. The number 9 is mid-airs. Now, where in the world can a mid-air occur? Right around here, for instance. Traffic patterns, fly-ins, glider operations, and practice areas. Also, the contributing factors are, again, distractions, situational awareness, and instructional flight. Now, this happens to be, can you see that helicopter? Can you look at the lower left-hand skid? Can you see that? Is it clear enough? Can you see the headset hanging off the bottom of it? If you can see the toe, the toe is bent up on the left skid. There's a headset. Well, if nothing else, imagine a headset hanging off there. Well, where in the world did that headset come from? Whoops, right there. This happened in Shenandoah Valley. One of our inspectors, Dave Keenan from our office, went out and worked this one. The helicopter was a petroleum helicopter. It was based in Shenandoah Valley. It was bringing a pilot, 2 paramedics back. Paramedics, one in the front seat and one facing aft in the middle seat in the back. This aircraft also had a TCAS on board, the helicopter did. The 172 was not talking to a soul. Just come rolling into the traffic pattern, no transponder, came up underneath the helicopter. The helicopter was in a turn and came down and took the wing off the aircraft. The aircraft spun in, and then the helicopter continued onto the pad. They never even realized what happened until they were on the ground and found the headset and some other body parts hanging off the skid. Now, of course, I took those pictures out. But anyway, you can see how that can happen, and it can happen in a heartbeat. The number 8, system component failures, non-power plant. Electrical failure, cabin fire, smoke, vacuum pump failures, carbon monoxide. Some of the contributing factors may be airspeed, situational awareness again, distraction, pilot fatigue, maintenance, and pre-flight. Well, let's take a look at what happened. Senator Carnahan's airplane, does anybody remember that? Well, that's it. That's the Cessna 335 of what's left of it. Again, our office launched on it because it was a very high-profile individual. You can see the pieces and parts on the floor. The NTSB identified it as the Cessna 335, November 835, 4 November 3 fatal. The pilot's failure to control the aircraft while maneuvering because of spatial disorientation, contributing to the accident with the failure of the airplane's primary flight indicators and adverse weather conditions, including turbulence. Well, what we actually found was that the attitude indicator had failed on the left side, and he was trying to cross-fly the airplane from the left seat to the right seat. And he was trying to do this and got himself into a world of hurt, and you can see the results of it. You know, these accidents, my friends, can happen to anybody at any given time. Number 7 is fuel related. Bad gauges, a good old watch to track your time, pre-flight planning, weather, winds, knowledge of fuel management, and system knowledge. The contributing factors, again, is distraction and trust, flight crew experience and planning. Well, let's talk about this one. That's an airplane that, how in the world could an airplane of a 172 crash and kill 2 people and seriously injure 1? Well, what had happened, here's the particular case. This is the NTSB's findings. This aircraft occurred, it was a November 84249er, 2 fatal, 1 serious. The pilot's inadequate flight planning and in-flight fuel management resulted in a total loss of engine power due to fuel exhaustion. Contributing to the accident was the operator's failure to ensure the aircraft records pertaining to the engine modification and fuel rate burn was available to the flight crew member. The aircraft had just had an STC done on it, and they raised the horsepower by about 10 or 12 horsepower. They didn't bother to put inside, from the STC, inside the AFM, the flight manual, the fuel rate burn. The pilot still thought he was going to burn 8 or 9 gallons when it actually burned 12 or 13 gallons. And it burned more fuel than he had. And needless to say, he started running out of fuel. Because his flight planning said, well, I've got X number of hours. In reality, he had this many hours. So this is something you just need to be aware of. If you're flying an airplane of differences, you need to make sure you understand the fuel and the fuel burn of that airplane. In this particular case, it was a young pilot, and He thought he had all the information, and he did have the information that pertained to that airplane at the time. He just did not have the information that pertained to that engine that was changed out. That extra 10 horsepower made a big difference to him. Number 6. Now this is other. Instrument approach procedures, tracks and altitudes flown, situational awareness are unknown, contributing factors are non-instrument pilots and got to get their itis. Well, let's take a look at this one. A few years ago, there was an aircraft, a Beech 200, that belonged to Rick Hendricks Motorsports. You remember that accident? Well, this is it. I happened to be on the operations group. We had another inspector from our office to actually go out to the accident site. From visiting with the crew and visiting with the other pilots, when you think about what in the world these people we interviewed had to go through to tell us what they were doing. We interviewed all the pilots that flew for Rick Hendricks. We interviewed all the first officers. And come to find out, this is what happened. If you look at the profile to the bottom and to the left, that would be the normal profile. He would come across at the very final approach fix out there, which is Bale intersection. If I could figure out how to make this thing. Oh, there it goes. That's Bale intersection. As he starts his descent down to the MDA with no DME, distance measuring equipment, here's the airport, and with DME, he is allowed to come down a little bit lower and the same distance away from the airport, then go missed approach. The missed approach is a climbing right turn back out to Bale intersection and hold. But what had happened, and this is the real short and long of it, this young lady who was the first officer on this particular flight, the captain was a stick and ball, no nonsense, no GPS, no gee whiz stuff, just give me some power levers and an ADF needle, I can fly you around the world. That's the kind of guy he was, and he probably could. The young lady was a very energetic young lady. She was trying to learn as much as possible. She took, this airplane had dual FMSs in it. It had the dual GPS systems in it. And what she had done, she had gone up there with their instructor pilot several times, and he had showed her how to take and make waypoints, how you can make this waypoint for this and waypoint this and a waypoint this. And man, it's just gee whiz, here I go, and man, I can't ever get lost. Well, what actually happened was this. The aircraft was given a clearance to go to the Bale intersection, to hold at Bale intersection, and I've got the picture in just a second, and to hold there, and then they were cleared for the localizer approach to runway 30. Well, what actually happened was this. They go out to Bale intersection, and she repositions exactly 5 miles to this point, which is where she thought Bale intersection was. So now you see that position now is directly over top of the airport. When she puts that in there, so he turns inbound, re-intercepts the localizer with no glide slope, they track inbound until they get to right here, and they think that's Bale intersection. They're really at the missed approach point. They start their descent. As you see, as they start their descent down, if I can figure out where this little cursor got to again. As they start their descent down and get down to the MDA, you can see where they are. They're already way past the airport. At this point, ATC had already terminated them over Bale intersection, cleared for the approach. And ATC had lost the transponder code because they were down in the mountains of Martinsville, Virginia. As the aircraft continued on, they got to a point they said, okay, well, we got to go missed. When they started missed, they thumped the top of that mountain out there. So technology is really, really great. Technology is really, really good, but you got to know what you're doing with it to get yourself in trouble. This young lady thought she was doing a great job. She was. She had flown with this other pilot who had shown her all these little tricks of the trade. In the real world, we would never have known about this unless that pilot came forward and told us about it. He was man enough to stand up and tell us what happened. You know, my heart goes out to the Rick Hendricks family because his son was on board, all his people. My heart goes out to everybody who gets killed in these airplanes. You know, like I said, I've been doing this a long time, and I have seen a lot of dead folks. I got to tell you, lots of dead folks. It doesn't get any better today than it did 27 years ago or 28 years ago. But what I try to do is I try to educate people by doing this, other seminars, other talks, about what can go wrong in that airplane. Who would have thought that a person of that caliber, flying that kind of airplane for that kind of company, could make a miscue of that and kill 9 folks? Unfortunately, it happens. Here's the radar track starting in the lower right-hand corner. If I can get this thing to go over there. You can see I'm not real technology qualified either. But anyway, you can see here's where they come in. They come right around again, and then they think they're over Beale intersection. Well, Beale intersection, they had moved it to way up here. And that's what all that looks like. And then when they go missed, they hit it right there. The people on the ground heard the airplane go over, but did not see it go over. There was a Lear 60 that was, when they were sent out to hold, there was a Lear 60 inbound, and he was established on the approach. So ATC could not clear these people for the approach until the airplane that's out of radar contact cancels on the ground or cancels in the air. So they had to wait for this Lear to cancel before they could let the Beech 200 King Air commence the approach. So anyway, that's one of the things that can happen in these airplanes. So when they were talking about technology, unfortunately, this is something that can happen. Now, what goes back to my heart is the airplane had an NDB in it, and Beale intersection is made up of an NDB. Why that captain did not see that NDB rotate, I don't know. I have no idea. No, nobody survived. It was all fatal. Oops. By interviewing all the other pilots. In fact, the young man who showed her how to do all this GPS stuff, we interviewed him. He's the one that told us how he had shown her how to do all this stuff. Say again? That's how he knew. We would probably not have figured it out. Okay. I may need a little help up here, folks. Oh, we got it. Yeah. Number 5. Unknown or undetermined. Well, that's kind of self-explanatory. We have no witnesses, no recorders, no non-volatile memory on GPSs, no nothing. Airspeed, control, bank angle, situational awareness, distraction, a lot of other things. Well, because we have no idea. Steve Fawcett. Does everybody remember Steve Fawcett? Well, that's what's left of his airplane. We found the airplane 1 year, almost to the day after he crashed. In fact, one of our guys in our office went back and reanalyzed all the radar data to figure out how all this happened. And he managed to figure out at the time, and he said, you know, I think at that time there was a really severe wind shear in that area. So he went back and pulled a lot of the winds, and they were determined to be between 700 and 1,000 foot minute vertical rate of descent. So when Steve Fawcett was flying up this canyon, we went back. The real hard problem with radar is if we don't have a positive radar contact and we have a primary target and then we have a secondary target. A secondary target is a transponder that's identified that we know the code on. The primary target is just a 1200 code, and we don't really know who it is, who it belongs to. So, but we found all these 1200 codes. There wasn't a lot out there, but they did find them. And Mark found this particular 1200 code, and he tracked this 1200 code till it went up in a valley, come down of a valley, and he could see it doing a 180-degree turn, and then it disappeared. Well, in that mountainous terrain, it's really, really mountainous. And then this airplane, we think, because we have, this airplane was a Citabria. It had nothing in it. It had one little radio, and that was it. So what we found is what you see right there. One of our guys from our office went out and worked this accident. And the short of it was, we had nothing to go off of, but they went back and started reanalyzing our radar. And our radar, again, it moves. You know, everybody thinks he says radar contact, you think he's right on top of you. That radar moves. It moves all over the place. So you've got to be aware that when he says he's 1 mile or 3 miles away, he may be 1 3/4 miles away, or he may be closer. So anyway, they're giving you an approximation because the radar the table does move a little bit. But in this particular case, we sent a team back out there 1 year later, and they found this airplane. As you can see, as far as the skeletal remains, they found a small part of a femur bone and a small part of a skull, and that's all they found. But they did find some paperwork. They found his certificate, and they found a few other things that was out of his billfold that was found in the woods by a hiker. Number 4, low altitude operations. Pipeline, power line, crop dusting, firefighting, and EMS operations. The contributing factors, again, is distraction, situational awareness, out-of-date charts, and cell phones. Now, you can't imagine how many accidents we have at low altitudes that are almost caused by cell phones. They're just really a pain. But that's one of the things that happened. This is an accident that I actually worked. As you can see, that's what's left of the tail of a P3 4-engine Lockheed tanker. This happened in Chino, California about 4 years ago. And what was happening right before the fire season, this instructor pilot had 2 pilots on board. All 3 of them on board were Navy pilots, all flying P3s. Highly qualified, highly experienced pilots. The guy in the jump seat was an FAA designated pilot examiner. He was giving them a 6158 check, which is a check, a competency check for that particular airplane. The guy in the right seat was brand new. He was going to be checked out in the firefighting business. As you can see from the picture, it was rolling, the hills were rolling. They come down like this. The aircraft came across, and normally I always have a good model with me, but my hand will have to work today. But anyway, the aircraft came down, came over top of this hill, and then swooped real low, was in a dive, and then here's this hill. He comes to it in a real tight left-hand turn. The left wingtip hits the ground. The left wing hits the ground, and it puts the aircraft into the side of the hill up there. And you can see the scatter pattern in the fuel that goes forward. You can see how it goes forward up through there. When it hit, needless to say, there's nobody survived this one. But what actually happened was they just misjudged the terrain. They misjudged the sink rate of that airplane. And you know, there was a lot of other things that came from this. To tell you a little short of this story, since I was really involved in it, we come to find out that the pilot doing the jump seat, now this is kind of a slap at the FAA, but what actually happened, and unfortunately, when I go out and do an investigation, I have no loyalty to the FAA. I have the loyalty to the flying public to figure out what happened, why it happened, and fix the problem. We'll come to find out this particular pilot had been doing certifications in P3s for 3 years. It says in the regulations for the flight standards to do an evaluation check on every pilot every 12 months. Well, the last one he had was 36 months ago. So the FAA had to make a determination. Once I found out and I presented this evidence to the flight standards, and I said, okay, folks, what are we going to do about it? They said, well, we're not going to go back and pull everyone's certificate, and we're not going to go back and reevaluate them, because at the time we felt like he had met all the qualifications and the certifications. So if the FAA had really wanted to be a real jerk about it, they could have gone back and reevaluated every pilot that this instructor pilot, designated pilot examiner, had issued a certificate to. But sometimes, you know, there was nothing wrong with the pilot qualifications, not a thing wrong with them. In fact, one of the inspectors went out and flew with one of the pilots soon thereafter, not in another airplane, another P3, just an evaluation, and he was top shelf. But again, every one of these pilots were all Navy trained. They all learned from the Navy. Not that the Navy is the best in the world, because I was in the Army. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. Nobody has said a word about my southern accent. Has everybody understand what I'm talking about? Can you understand me okay? Really? I heard somebody, they say they were from Asheville. Who in the world's from Asheville? Ah, I'm from Arden. Jail, Tijuana, 6 years ago, right? Anyway, you know, this business I'm in is a very, very serious business. And so I take it very seriously. But let's go back to the P3. The FAA, in their wisdom, and I think in their judgment, they did a great job by saying, we need to let these pilots move on, but we'll go through and just check a few out to make sure they were as good as they said at the time of the accidents. And this pilot, of course, he left a brand new wife and 2 brand new kids, the one in the jump seat. He had no control over the accident. There was the guy in the left seat that got himself into this tight turn. But you can see when you have an accident, we really dig deep. Number 3, system component and failure. Single drive mags, cylinders, valves, cams, shafts, cranks, pumps, and other components. And this is just maintenance and pre-flight. You see what happens in the back of that right engine there? There's where the cylinder came out. You can see the engine's feathered. The other engine was still running. They had, I think there was 9 people in this particular airplane. He was really, really heavy, and he just started running out of altitude, ideas, and airspeed, so he put it in the water. Everybody got out, nobody died, but that is one of the things that contributed to the accident. This happened in the Bahamas. And we sent a person down to the investigation down there because Air Sunshine is one of the larger 135 operations. So we sent them down to look at that. That was kind of a neat recovery. You know, the water recoveries are very, very interesting to do. The number 2 is controlled flight and terrain. Everybody talks about what in the world, how can you possibly fly an airplane into the ground? Well, this is a mountainous, rising terrain, dark night, moonless, clear for the visual. And clear for the visual, I threw in there for the reason I'll show you in a second. Contributing factors are situational awareness. Always know where you are and your surroundings, always, especially on a dark, dark night going in through mountains. Know where you are. Training, pre-flight planning, and of course people talking to you or somebody getting sick in the airplane is some kind of a distraction. This was a Beech 200 King Air. It was on a medical flight. The aircraft climbed with the mountain terrain, and this is what the NTSB said. It was not VMC conditions prevailed at the destination. The winds were 300 at 4, 11,000 over. The pilot stated to HC that Bozeman, this happened in Bozeman, Montana, was in sight, and he was cleared to descend from 15,000 to 13,000. The pilot acknowledged the request and requested a visual approach. The aircraft was cleared for the visual, and the radar service was terminated because they lost coverage at 11,000. The wreckage was located approximately 80 feet below the top of the ridge at an elevation of 5,700 feet. What actually happened was this. As you can see, his flight plan coming from the top of the page to the bottom. Here's was his last radar hit, and you can see all the way down through here, and here is the impact point right there. But what actually happens, I wish I could have done this a little bit different. Knowing what I know now, I would do this. But he was looking out the window, and he saw what he thought was Bozeman, Montana. Actually, what it was the city farther past Bozeman, Montana. Bozeman was right below the cloud and right at the top of the mountains. So he started his descent looking for that point out there. There's part of what the mountains would look like. This is what the accident site looked like. As you can see, he hit almost perfectly level, hit the top of the trees into the stream. You know, as close as, you know, as they say, is, you know, like horseshoes and hand grenades. You know, if he had been 80 feet higher, he would have missed the mountain. Probably scared the pee-doodly out of him, but he would have missed it. But what actually happened was, like I said, he saw that, what he thought was Bozeman, but Bozeman was right here, and that mountain obscured it, and he was aiming for that, and he thumped it. You know, and all the people died. It's very unfortunate these things happen. Did he have any kind of terrain avoidance on the airplane? No, he didn't. Huh? He had a radar telemeter, yeah, but he didn't have it turned on. And the number 1, this is my favorite. Everybody's talked about loss of control today, right? Environmental conditions, wind, experience, perceptual, physical, sensories. One of the things is a contributing factor is airspeed control, distraction, situational awareness, currents, and medical. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a real-time accident. You ready? And I'm going to let you tell me what happened. That's real-time, real accident. You think you can hear it a minute and die in 15 seconds? Bet you're bippy. What happened? Huh? Looked like you lost the engine. What else? Oh, man, you guys are pretty good. I'm going to let you look at it from the inside now. Here today and gone tomorrow. Get your attention, doesn't it? That's how quick it happens. You know, I come down here, and every time I speak at these things, I get very emotional from the standpoint that when I go back home, my wife says, how do you do what you do for as long as you've done it? And you don't ever say anything about it. Well, you know, this is the way I get it out, by talking to people. You know, and we have in our office, it's a very humorless bunch of guys and gals. I mean, you've got to be able to be pretty thick-skinned in my office, because it's always jabs and jags, because when they come back after seeing stuff that we see, and I hope you folks never deal in this kind of stuff, but it sure gets your attention on how safe should be. You know, I fly, when I'm not doing this particular job, I fly a G4 for the FAA. I fly November 1. And you know, those guys don't like to fly with me, because you talk about being extra careful, extra cautious, double check this and double check that. Ishimo does it, you know, and but the guys appreciate what I do, because I show them stuff like this, but I show them a lot more graphic detail when I do some of the presentations for the hangar. As they can tell, I show the real stuff, and it gets their undivided attention. Before, I would never do that to you folks, you know. And right now, in summation of this deal, it says the FAA has focused on pilots' educational awareness. That's what the FAST team does, and they do an absolute wonderful job. They do a great presentation. They're out there with the public every day. However, better technology is giving the pilot better safety tools. You know, back when I learned to fly, my first airplane to learn to fly in was a Beech 18. You know, that's what I learned to fly at the age of 12. Actually, well, about 13 maybe at that time in a Beech 18. But anyway, you know, I didn't know any better. A Beech 18, if you give me a Volkswagen or a Corvette, I wouldn't have known any difference at the age of 12 or 13. But back in those days, they had one radio and it had an old coffee grinder ADF. But today, I fly an airplane that has so much gee whiz, I can program the airplane on the ground. I can hit the autopilot as soon as we get the gear up. It can take me to an altitude. It can take me to a course. It can set up the approach. It can line the approach up, and all I got to do is put the gear out. Those airplanes of today are so smart. And that's what these general aviation pilots, they have developed this into a more and more technological world. Technological world. Being in North Carolina, I don't talk real well. It's okay. I understand that. But anyway, this is what it's all about. Again, my name is Tony James. I'm with the Office of Accident Investigation in Washington. And I cut this just a little bit on the short side, but I didn't cut any of the slides out, but I cut out part of the talking part of it. But anyway, I am out of the Office of Accident Investigation in Washington. And they were talking about, you'll see us on TV? No. You will never see an FAA investigator on TV whatsoever. That is just taboo for us to do. We leave that to the NTSB to do. They're the spokesmen for the accidents. They take care of the probable cause. But the FAA has 9 responsibilities that we have to do. And the FAA is the judge, the jury, and we determine a lot of things. On a team, when I go out, normally a small accident, I'll take between about 3 and 4, maybe 5 people with me on a small accident. A large accident, a large transport category airplane, I'll have as many as 20. And I will have some of the highest degreed experts in the world. And that's what I have to get to the bottom of it. Because your flying safety is our primary objective. And our office is very dedicated to that. And I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate everything you've done. I appreciate you being safe out there. And again, it's in Washington, D.C. That phone number right there is anywhere in the world. I mean, I can be anywhere in the world, and this phone will ring, and I will take your calls. I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming to Sun and Fun. Fly safe.